we have this one verse this morning. And I got to be honest, it's a lot easier for me to just preach on one verse. The study time gets a little bit more compressed on a busy week. It becomes a little bit easier for me to be able to just dial in and say, God, what are you saying in these 9 words, 10 words? What do you have for us? Now, some of you are probably like, oh my word, if I had to give a speech based on one sentence, I don't know what I would do. Fortunately, I don't need a whole lot to develop a lot of content here. Talking is kind of what I do for a living, I guess, huh? I have a few points here that I'd love for our church to be able to just fully embrace in regards to what Jesus is saying here in the Sermon on the Mount. The first point that I want to make is that Jesus took what was shameful and he made it meaningful. Jesus took what was shameful and he made it meaningful. Now there's this phrase in life that sometimes gets used, this phrase that we might even use to describe different situations or circumstances in our life. We'll call it the walk of shame, right? It's been used in so many different circumstances. And the fact of the matter is like a walk of shame is something that is pretty common for us in life. When we've done something wrong, when we've stepped out of line, when we've gotten called to the principal's office. Never happened to me. Where it's this walk of shame where you're stuck walking somewhere with your head down, ashamed of what's going on, potentially experiencing some sort of public embarrassment. It's taking a loss to the ultimate level with public humiliation involved. I remember playing basketball. Now everybody's gonna be like, oh great, another basketball story from this guy. Sorry, I've done a lot of that. A lot of my life has been spent on a basketball court. Literally, I've grown up between the basketball court and church. That's been like my life experience. So you're either gonna get a church story or a basketball story. It's pretty, you know what you're gonna get pretty much every week. But there was this place that we played at in college, this college called Martin Luther. Now, Martin Luther was down in this small town in south central Minnesota, and they were in our conference. We were playing in the UMAC when I was at North Central. And I don't even know how to begin to describe this place called Martin Luther and the atmosphere on this basketball court. It was this old gym that was run down. And I remember the floor being super slippery because there was just no wax left on the floor. And I see you nodding, Megan. You know what I'm talking about. and we're sitting in our it's one of those like gym / auditoriums, right? Like where there's like there's the basketball floor, and then there's the seats, the bleachers, and then on the other side of that there's a stage, because when they needed to do some sort of a production or ceremony, it was all done in the gym. It was a multi-purpose room, and our benches against the stage, and we're facing the crowd. So there's like a curtain behind us, and then the crowd is just like across the court, and like it's standing room only. And I don't know why, because there was nothing better to do in this town than to go to this basketball game. But you would have thought that it was Duke or something. And they literally, I would actually say that they were crazier than the Cameron Crazies, if you know what I'm talking about. And their student section was lit. And I mean that in every definition of the word that you can begin to make up, with the exception of the fact that they were the light of the world, as Jesus says. And it was the strangest environment that I've ever played in. The people were fanatic about their basketball team, this small Division III school in the middle of nowhere with nothing else to do. So they showed up to their local college basketball game as if it was the Super Bowl in the NFL. And they would go to obnoxious lengths to try to distract the other team. I mean, these people would steal the cardboard cutout of Britney Spears at the gas station that Pepsi was using to advertise, and they would place it underneath the opposing team's hoop to try to distract you with it while you were shooting free throws. I remember one time we were there, they had a guy who literally wrapped himself up in Christmas lights. And he plugged it in on the baseline, and he would just walk back and forth and dancing and jumping around wearing Christmas lights to try to keep the other team distracted on the baseline of where they were shooting. And free throws were wild. Like, you actually it was tough to go to the free throw line because half the time I was laughing so much that I couldn't shoot the ball properly. It wasn't so chaotic that you could just block it all out. It was so individual and random that it was it had to get your attention. And I found them to be a fascinating group of people, even entertaining as long as we were winning. Because of how obnoxious they were, you couldn't possibly, though, get to the bus fast enough after a loss. That walk across the court was one of the most shameful walks you would ever take, because they would let you know not just that you were terrible at basketball, but every little thing that you were wearing or doing or however else they could make it personal, they would, in making fun of you. They were making fun of guys' hair. They were making fun of, we were a small Christian college wearing jerseys that were probably from the 80s still at that point in time. And they would make fun of everything that they could make fun of. It was like the ultimate walk of shame, but it wasn't even just about losing a basketball game. It was just humiliating on a personal level. And what we have to realize here about Matthew chapter 5, verse 41, is that Israel at this point in time is a Roman-occupied territory. And the Romans were masters at imposing this idea of a walk of shame. When they would win a battle, they would parade their newfound prisoners of war through the streets of Rome like trophies, forcing them to walk wearing chains as if they were a medal of failure, as they were paraded through the streets by the Roman soldiers on the way to their prison, while crowds gathered to jeer them and celebrate the victory of Rome, and to impose this ultimate shameful walk upon their life, as if it would have been better if you died in battle than to be taken prisoner by Rome. And it wasn't just war that they imposed this walk of shame. In fact, Roman law created opportunities for Roman citizens, and especially Roman soldiers, to oppress those that lived in Roman territories. One of those was this law that set the precedent that at any given moment, a Roman soldier could tell someone living in a Roman-occupied territory who was not a Roman citizen to carry their gear for the next mile of their journey, or to be punished as a result of their denying or attempted denial of this law. Can you imagine that? And now, it wasn't necessarily a mile, it was literally 1,000 paces. So at any given time, a Roman soldier could take any random person and say, hey, here's all of my equipment. Here's my gear. And from this point, I'm heading this way for the next 1,000 paces. You get to carry all of my stuff. I mean, we got some people in the room who are some diehard sports fans. Think about the team you hate the most. Believe it or not, for me, it's not the Packers. Okay? Just, you guys can get over that. It's okay. I really dislike the Bears. I wouldn't be caught dead wearing a Bears jersey. See, we can agree, right? We can agree. I found agreement in the room. Praise God. All it took was the Bears. But if I were living in a bear-occupied territory, those people who were soldiers for that government would be able to force me to walk the next mile wearing a Bears jersey. Could you imagine how miserable that'd be? So walk in with your head down like, I don't want to wear this thing. This is the worst. I can't believe this. It was considered to be utterly embarrassing for the Jews to have to carry the equipment of a Roman soldier. It was demeaning. It was degrading. And the Jews hated this custom. They hated this law. What's wild is that we actually see this in the crucifixion story. Many of us don't realize it, but this law is being imposed on a man named Simon of Cyrene. Mark 15, starting with verse 16, says, the soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him being Jesus, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. They didn't set it on him, they pressed it on him. And began to call him out, Hail, King of the Jews. Again and again, they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him, mocking him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country. He wasn't even one of the onlookers. He wasn't even there to watch this spectacle of crucifixion. He wasn't there to be a part of the crowd. He wasn't there to stand on the streets. He wasn't even there to witness what was going on. He was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Do you imagine that? He's just making his way in from the countryside. Here's Simon with his kids like, hey, come on, guys. Come on, we're going to go to the market and get some food. We're going to go to the well and get some water. What journey were they on? What was happening in their life? And then out of nowhere, this soldier starts to yell at him and let him know, like, hey, you over there, get over here. Pick up this 300-pound cross and carry it up the Skull Hill. Could you imagine what that's like? Like, what just happened? Who's going to make sure my kids are okay? This place is chaos. I don't even know who this man is. I don't even know what's going on. Why am I carrying this cross? I can't imagine what it would like to live under those kinds of laws. You're going about your day. Simon could be headed anywhere at this point in time. And do you imagine? You're going about your work day. You're in the grocery store. You're minding your own business. You're at the park playing with your kids. And out of nowhere, a soldier just lets you know, like, hey, your turn. Saddle up, we got a mile ahead of us. You're going to carry all of my stuff. And I'd just be like, excuse me? You want me to do what? You want me to carry your equipment? You want me to carry his cross? How far? Well, can I get permission from my boss at least? I got to check out of work. What am I supposed to do with my kids? What about the lost time? What about? We would have a million different questions, and you're just supposed to say yes. It's no wonder the Jewish people hated this law. Like, they absolutely hated it because it was a shameful process. Not only were they an occupied state living under Roman rule, paying Roman taxes, but they were subjugated to Roman practices. They wanted to be able to practice their own customs. They wanted to be able to worship their own God, not have to feel like they had to worship Caesar. And then you get these types of practices imposed upon them, and you're supposed to just deal with it. It's no wonder that the whole demeanor of the Jewish people is, God, where are you in this? Come on, you've been there. We don't need to judge them. God, where are you in this? But here's the thing. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, talking to his followers, doers of his word, people who he's called. The instructions that Jesus gives them aren't that of the way the Jewish people feel about Roman law. They're that of somebody who says to go above and beyond in serving your oppressor. Go above and beyond in serving your enemy. Oh, they want to mock you? Keep serving them. Go further. It's this radical idea that drops an absolute bomb on the whole idea of the way that they're living, because they're living with this bitterness towards Roman rule, and Jesus is saying, lean in. Use it to bring my kingdom. Use it to bring the gospel. Use it to a level where it's almost uncomfortable for them. Joke's kind of on them at this point in time. They think that they're humiliating you, and you're turning around and serving them cheerfully in a way that they don't know how to respond. He took what was shameful and he told them to make it meaningful. He said, you're looking at it all wrong. This way of serving should be a shift in our attitudes. It should be able to turn the Roman Empire upside down, which it actually eventually did. Because there's a couple of different ways for us to live our lives as followers of Jesus. You guys ever received poor customer service? Yes? No? I mean, get some head nods at least. What is our human flesh reaction to getting poor customer service? We match the energy of the service we've gotten. Oh, you're going to treat me bad. Okay, I'm going to return that kind of energy to you. Right? When somebody hurts us, even if we don't retaliate, oftentimes our response is to match their energy, to match what they're doing, to match their actions. And this whole idea that Jesus is saying is you're not called to match the energy of the people around you. You're called to set the standard. It's like the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. As a kid, I used to get yelled at for touching the thermostat, so I still don't do it. I have some PTSD from that. Heidi would be like, it's cold now. So I was like, I don't know what you want me to do about it. I'm scared of that thing. But anybody can read the temperature of the room. But only a called person can set the temperature in the room. And God has called us to set the temperature in the room, to set the standard in the atmosphere around us, to set the spiritual levels, to set the standard of faithfulness, to set the standard of hospitality, to set the standard of worship, to set the standard of how we respond to the world around us. God has not called us to match the energy of the world. The world is lost and dying and going to hell. What good would it be for us to match their energy? God has called us to set the tone, to set the standard, to bring everybody else up a level. Ask yourself, am I helping people around me level up? Or am I sinking to the level that they've set? I would even say that when we come into this room on Sunday morning, am I bringing the level of intensity up? Am I bringing the intentionality up? Am I bringing the presence up? Am I being an encourager? Am I bringing value on Sunday mornings? Because I'm not just here to read the temperature. The gathering of the saints is sacred. In fact, one of the things that I think we have to realize is in our homes, with our kids, with those around us, do they know what we consider sacred? Do they know? Not that I have to preach the gospel like with authority everywhere I go, but do they know what I consider sacred in my life? I think that that's a test in our lives. Do your kids know what you consider sacred in life? I have to be very careful. Because it's really easy for me to take what's common and to show my kids that that's sacred. And at the same time, it's really easy for me to take what's sacred with my kids and show them that that's common by the way I live my life. I already told you, I talk a lot about basketball. If I'm not careful, I'm going to teach my kids that basketball is sacred and church is common. Ouch. If I'm not careful, I'm going to teach my kids that their hobby is sacred and that church is common. Because that's how I live my life. And what they're getting is caught and not taught. You can say all of the right things, but if your life doesn't line up with it, you're teaching them the wrong things. You're teaching them that what is common is sacred and what is sacred is common. And the gathering of the saints is sacred. Our devotional time is sacred. Our relationship with Him is sacred. We should take that seriously, but also when we gather with the saints, we should set the temperature. We should set the thermostat. We should come prepared. What are you bringing to church? Not what are you leaving at church? It matters. How we live matters. And that's why point number 2 is obedience needs to rise above obligation. Obedience needs to rise above obligation for people of God. Again, Jesus talking to His followers. I love it when I tell my kids to do something at home. Hey, clean your room. I did it yesterday, or I did it last month. Well, no matter when it was, like I did it recently. Right? Clean your dishes. Whatever those household chores are. For the record, I did that as a kid too. I'm not even judging them. I'm not even really complaining. It just helps us understand. But there's a difference between when your kids do something out of obligation and when they do something because they're a part of the family. When we have to remind them nonstop that, hey, wash your dishes after dinner. Aren't you grateful that mom made a meal for you? You didn't have to work for it at all. You didn't have to do anything, and you got fed today. Well, the least you could do out of gratitude is to wash your dishes, right? And that's almost a daily reminder, but there are days, occasionally, where our kids just do those things out of gratitude and not out of obligation. And there's a huge difference in the atmosphere of our household when that happens. Because there are certain things that we try to communicate with our kids, like, hey, as Forsbergs, this is what we do. As Forsbergs, this is how we live. As Forsbergs, this is what we prioritize. We do this because we're a part of the family, not because it's an obligation that I have to do it because dad said so, or because mom said so, or because I want to get my meal tomorrow at least, right? There's a difference between doing something out of obligation and doing something because you're a part of the family, because you want to bring value, because you want to bring up the thermostat, because you want to set a better temperature, because you're not just trying to match the energy of the room. But if we aren't careful, we don't realize that we're living out of obligation in regards to our faith. But obligatory obedience is selfish. It is, right? When you go and grumblingly, you do something with a grumbling spirit, why are you grumbling? Because you don't want to do what's being asked of you. Whether we want to call it selfish or not, we'll call it selfish in somebody else, but we'll call it concern when it's us. But people who take that second mile, who move forward, who serve more, who give more, who help more, who set the temperature in the room, the second mile obedience is selflessness as poetry. It's beautiful. It's attractive to those around them. It gains favor. It helps other people want to love you and want to be a blessing to you because you've been a blessing to them. A lot of people have said it. I don't even know who to attribute for the quote, but they said, take the second mile, it's less crowded. But we have to understand, though, that this obligatory obedience is selfish in nature. It's also, if I'm going to be honest, it's entry-level faith. It's base-level faith. It's just kind of get my foot in the door faith. Right? It's fence-riding faith. It's immature faith. I don't know about you, but my goal is not to, at the end of this life, to be able to say, just barely made it. That was a close one, right? Like, that's not how I want to live my life. I want to live a life of faithfulness. I want to glorify God with every opportunity that I can. I want to honor him with everything in me. I don't want to just go part way. Like, I don't view this gift of Jesus, this sacrifice, as being just a get out of hell free card. It's an invitation to relationship with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the creator of heaven and earth, this magnificent God that created everything we see in all of his grandeur, and yet still sees me individually and loves me and cares for me and sent his son for me. I want to live a life that is filled with gratitude for his sacrifice, but also that glorifies him every step of the way for the second mile and the third mile and the fourth mile. And I don't just say that because I'm running a marathon in June, but I mean that. It's actually like very, very good illustrations for me in my soul to understanding what endurance running is like. Helps me understand what enduring faith is supposed to be like. Third point that I want to make is that the first mile is mandatory. I've already kind of discussed the obligatory mile. But the second mile is revolutionary. The first mile is mandatory. The second mile is revolutionary. Here, do you want me to get that for you? Here. It's great. I love embarrassing my kids and other people's kids. It's okay. They're going to be sitting back there in the shadows next week. No, I love that you girls will sit up on the front row. But the first mile is mandatory. The second mile is revolutionary. We have to understand that it's the second mile that sets the tone for everybody else. If we just go the first mile, the world will never think we're any different than the world. Because guess what? Believers and non-believers alike, they had to take that first mile. Otherwise, go to jail. Get whatever punishment that you get. The first mile does not separate us from the world. The first mile does not show the world who we are. The first mile does not show the world what we're about. It's the second mile that makes us different. And Jesus understood that the second mile was revolutionary. And we see that throughout the early church as they went from being oppressed by Roman government to eventually where Roman government adopted Christianity as their religion of choice. And it's because of standards that Jesus set with his followers. It's so far off from normal to get over yourself. You're doing that first mile anyways. Get over yourself and do the second mile. Conversation happens in that second mile. You might spend that first mile. The Roman soldier thinks they're going to be able to mock you, humiliate you, make you feel like you're less than. But when you get to that 1,000th pace, I guarantee you the rest of the world is like, take my hat off. I'm done. See you later. I'm going to go back to what I was doing. But when you get to that 1,000th pace, a mile in, the Roman soldier is watching. The world is watching. And everybody wants to know what you're going to do right now, expecting you to just give up, to start taking the equipment off, to dropping it all on the ground, maybe even with a little bit of attitude because now I'm done. I did what I was supposed to do. I did what you can make me do, but no more. But when you get to that 1,000th pace and you're like, okay, I'm going to take one more. Take one more. 1,003, 1,004, 1,005, 1,006. The Roman soldier is going, what's going on? Why is this person acting this way? Weird, isn't it? Yeah, we're supposed to be. Moses used the word peculiar. Not a word I would usually use. And as you've surpassed 1,050, at some point in time, the Roman soldier is going to be like, what are you doing? And why are you doing this? what's different about this situation? The last guy literally counted the paces off and dropped everything at number 1,000. What are you doing? Oh, well, you see this guy named Jesus. You might have heard of him. You guys put him on a cross, right? The words that he said stuck with me when he said to love your enemy. When he said to walk the extra mile. When he said to turn the other cheek. I'm practicing that right now. I just want to honor you. You've imposed this service upon me, but now I'm choosing to serve you. My choice. Your blessing. Because I want to be able to make a difference. Because I want to show you what it looks like to receive grace in the way that I've received it. So I'm going to give you the grace of giving you another mile. In fact, I'm going to walk alongside of you and I'm going to talk with you and we're going to have to spend this time together. In fact, you might actually get so annoyed by me that you might want to carry your own gear. But the fact of the matter is like, because what we do is not normal, when we make it normal, when we make it common, then it's no longer attractive. Because we get caught up in the legalities and the religiosity of following Jesus. And we make it about checking the box of going to church and about not doing certain things and about trying to justify our own lives and make ourselves righteous. And the fact of the matter is legalities were not what Jesus was about. He said legality is gone. Go the extra mile. Legality would have said to go the first mile. And then go on with your life. You checked the box. I remember I had a friend who had his appendix burst. And we were in college at the time, and it wasn't during like the normal school year. We were both living on campus for the summer while we were working in the Twin Cities. And we'd been out working out, and he had this pain in his stomach, and I didn't remember what side of the body an appendix is on. I still don't know. And I was like, oh, that's strange. He's like, I got this piercing pain in my side. I was like, what side is your appendix on? I don't know. And we're both like, left, right, left, I don't know. And so he's like, you know what, I'm just going to go take a nap. And he went to go try to take a nap, sleep it off. And he called me like a half an hour later. He's like, man, the pain is getting worse. He's like, I can't fall asleep. And he asked me to take him to the hospital. And I remember taking him to the hospital, and they said, yeah, you have appendicitis. We need to get you in for an appendectomy immediately to remove the appendix. And this got me to thinking, though, you have this ruptured appendix, this thing that's causing pain that is ultimately going to poison your entire body if you don't do something about it. And it got me to thinking about this condition that we have as followers of Jesus, because we get caught up in legalities. God, I'm going to do the first mile, and then I'm done. We start to put limits on God. We start to put limits on what he can ask us to do. We start to put limits on our faith. We start to put limits because of our comfort. And we start to try to just dial things back to what we think is manageable and what we think is fine for faith. That we define it for ourselves. And it's this condition, though, that if removing an appendix is called an appendectomy, then removing a pharisaical spirit, the spirit of a Pharisee, should be a pharisectomy. Not my thought. Peter Haas down at Substance Church, he wrote a book about it, but it's legitimate in our lives, where we want to systematize our faith. And we want to be able to say, God, we checked the box. So, the old, like, when I get to heaven and the Lord asks, what did you do to allow you to enter the kingdom of heaven. And we start to check the box. I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. Because we want to be able to justify ourselves in faith. And the fact of the matter is there's nothing we can do to justify our ability to enter the kingdom of heaven. We only get to because of what Jesus has done. And because of that, we need to completely get rid of this idea that following Jesus is this set of things that we can accomplish like the Pharisees. Because if that was the case, Jesus would have came back to this world as a Pharisee. If legalities and the obligatory obedience were going to revolutionize the world, the Jews already had everything they needed. In fact, there was this man named the Apostle Paul. You might have heard of him. He was called Saul before they called him Paul. Not necessarily a name change. It's just the difference between Hebrew and Greek. But with him, he literally told us that he was the Pharisee of all Pharisees. That he was more accomplished than everybody else. That he checked every box. And that if anybody was going to be accomplished, it was going to be the Apostle Paul. And yet, even on his best day, in his weakness, he is strong. If we were going to rely solely on the legalities of reading the temperature in the room and the obligatory faith that we perceive as necessary to follow Jesus, it wouldn't have been Jesus that was sent to save our sins. It would have been Saul or Paul. But we needed the radical grace of Jesus. But with that, Jesus has called us to go the extra mile. To give radical grace and mercy. To serve others. To love our enemies. To go above and beyond, to do even more than is comfortable, because our life is not our own. The worship team wants to join me. As I wrap up service here, we're going to close with just a little bit of time of worship and reflection. But I do believe as we've looked back this morning on 2025 and even a little bit further, I like to look back and see kind of where things were on day one when I got here. Not because I'm awesome, but because God is. And I believe that he's doing something in this place. And I believe that he has a plan and purpose and promises for this place. And I am so honored that I get to be a part of what he's doing. But as we look back in moments like this, we should look back and be encouraged by what God has done in his faithfulness. But if all we do is look back, we can never, ever go the second mile. Because we'll just be counting the steps and be done at the first mile. Our best days will always be behind us. The most impactful moments will always be behind us. What's important will always be behind us. I believe in this season that God is calling us to go the extra mile. I believe that in this season that God is calling us to do more, that God is calling us to reach more, that God is calling us to give more, that God is calling us to a season of generosity, not just in the way that we give, but in the way that we worship, and in the way that we lead, and the way that we live, and the way that we serve. In the last year, we served 788 people through our food shelf, which is an incredible number. We served 75-ish families with backpacks. We invested in ministries in our community. We invested in churches where the gospel is illegal to share. We've rescued children from sex trafficking. We've gone above and beyond, and yet God's still not finished yet. That's still the first mile. He's called us to do more. He's called us to reach more. He's called us to give more. He's called us to serve more. He's called us to continue to revolutionize the world around us because he is good and his love endures forever. because he's been faithful and because he gave us his son. Listen, if Jesus calls for radical honor and obedience for our enemy, this is what he's telling them. Honor and obey your enemy. Love your enemy. Serve your enemy. Go above and beyond. Set a new standard. If Jesus calls us for radical honor and obedience for an enemy, what is the end result of that kind of obedience towards our loving Father? Towards the creator of heaven and earth? Towards Jehovah Jireh, our provider? Towards Jehovah Rapha, our healer? Towards Jehovah Shalom, our peace? I wonder what that kind of radical obedience does, not just to a church, but to a community, a world that God has called us to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world towards. Because I believe that we have a church of extra mile fathers and mothers who would not only understand the promises of God, the promise of Joshua when he said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," but who will be intentional in implementing that for their children. The most important thing that we can do as parents is to ensure that when our children leave our house, and it's coming sooner than you think, that they leave our house, that they leave our homes with a strong faith that is full of conviction. We need them to know the Word of God, and we need them to be able to identify His voice in their lives. Otherwise, what do you think the world will do to them? We need extra mile intercessors, people who will pray when others sleep, people who will pray when others play, people who will pray when prompted, no matter what's going on around them, and people who will make an appointment with God and refuse to miss it. I believe that we have extra mile believers in the areas of compassion and service, as we've seen people continue to give and give and give and give to our food shelf, as we've been able to feed more and more families, as we've been able to pray over those meals and send those into households where people desperately need Jesus, not just their next meal. We have people in this place who go the extra mile in the area of hospitality and making others feel welcome in this church and in the kingdom. People who got out of their way to make sure that not only that there's space, but there's an intentional invitation for others to join in and take part on what's happening in this church. I believe that in this place we have extra mile neighbors, extra mile co-workers, extra mile siblings, extra mile business leaders, extra mile community servants, extra mile evangelists, and extra mile disciple makers. We've seen God's faithfulness in this place, even through those extra mile givers, people who give generously because they believe in what God is doing and what God has for this church. And our partners in ministry, both in this community and around the world. I believe that God is calling us not to go the first mile on obligation, but to set a new standard, to revolutionize this community by going the extra mile in every way that we can think of, so that the world may know Jesus, the greatest gift we've ever received. Would you stand with me this morning? We're going to take a moment to worship together. Just going to remind you once again, you have as much of God's presence as you want, and there's more available. So Holy Spirit, we ask that you would have your way in this place. God, be honored by the praises of your people. Be enthroned in this place. Be glorified. Holy Spirit, I pray that you would tug at our hearts. God, in what areas are you calling us to go the extra mile? In what areas, God, have you called us to go further? In what areas have you called us to set a new standard? Holy Spirit, I pray that you would speak to us, that you would convict us, God, of those areas where we've been only dealing with obligation level of obedience. But God, I pray that you would call us to be standard setters. You've already called us image bearers, co-heirs with Christ. But God, I pray that you would call us standard bearers. God, be glorified in this place as we lift high your name. Worship team, would you lead?